Hello, Ari.
Hi, Matthew.
How are you?
Not bad. How you doing?
Yes, I'm very good. It's 10 o'clock at night here, so I guess it's 9 a.m. there, isn't it? Technology works. It's fantastic.
Oh, good. I didn't realise it's so late by you.
Yeah. Opposite side of the world. The sun's slowly getting lower in the sky, so you can kind of see winter's on the horizon, but hopefully that means summer for you guys finally.
Yeah, it's just starting to. I mean, it's terrible. It's disgusting weather today, but yeah, last few days we had a little bit of sun. So everyone, you know how people in England get like still like 8 degrees, but a little bit of sunshine, and everyone starts getting giddy with excitement. So
Yeah, and soon you can have a drink outside of here with six other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to keep track of the rules, to be honest, because they're doing it in stages. But I think from 29th you can have a couple over in your garden, and then and then from the 12th of April you can go out in a restaurant garden, and then in May it kind of we'll see. We've stopped counting our chickens really when it comes to what's going to happen.
Yeah. We've been kind of going in and out of lockdown here in Auckland, so there'll be a short, sharp 7-day lockdown, and then the next week they'll have a festival. So it's really bizarre.
I bet everyone's quite happy with how they've done it in New Zealand, right? I mean, from our perspective, New Zealand's always seen as the they did it brilliantly. But it's you get like one case and then you shut down for a week, right? Which is interesting.
Yeah, exactly right. But people always find something to complain about, and most people seem to be whinging about a 7-day lockdown. And I'm kind of like, try 12, 40 months in the UK, and see how you feel.
Uncertainty though, right? Because if you're kind of living normally and then one person has it and overnight it's told to shut down, I mean, I can see the unique challenge of that, as opposed to just being told, don't get me wrong, I know what I prefer, but it's an impossible situation, however you do it, I think.
Yeah, completely. Well, anyway, I guess let's get cracking. I think there's a few people on, which is really good. So obviously welcome everybody to today's Q&A with Ari Last. He's the as you can see, he's the founder of Bubble. Ari, I think we met around about 5 years ago for the first time. You're still dabbling with the idea of Bubble. I was working at Y-Plan, and obviously time flies, and I think you've got over 100,000 parents on the platform now. And you've raised over $4 million US.
Probably about that. I remember that coffee we had, because I'm not lying, actually. I still remember it was in Soho in central London, and because I walked out and I remember looking at my phone and just being so excited. I think we probably had like 2 bookings while you and I were talking. And so I remember those early times where I used to like celebrate every single booking. And there are other moments like that I always like pick out, and obviously time's moved on, but it's been like a good lesson for me about celebrating those early wins.
It's interesting because you've kind of crossed paths. So obviously I was at Y-Plan, we raised 32 million, but we went down like that. And meanwhile, you've been on the up, which is really exciting to see. But look, I guess to start off with, do you want to give everyone kind of a background story about Bubble and what really inspired you to create it?
Sure, and thanks everyone for dialing in. Nice to meet you, so to speak. I mean, Bubble really came from a personal pain point of mine. So I've got three little kids now, but the idea for Bubble really came about quite quickly after having my first son, and just within like hours, realizing genuinely that parenting is just way too hard, than it should be, certainly in this day and age. And that was kind of, I think generally parenting is unbelievably difficult. I then quickly, realized that a lack of childcare was actually at the root of so much of what is stressful and challenging about parenting. And for me personally, it was just like this massive loss of flexibility and spontaneity. And I just thought it was a crazy impact on my life, a crazy impact on pretty much every parent I spoke to or knew. And this whole sector had been completely left behind by technology. It was like largely untouched. So that really like piqued my interest in doing something in this space. Professionally, I've been working at marketplace businesses. I was at Betfair, massive gambling business, marketplace. I was in a a fintech in London called Market Invoice. It's called Market Finance now, which is invoice trading platform. So I had some exposure to like marketplace platforms and the great products that they produce for customers. Then I had this very like personal experience of like, you know, there's a real problem in this market, which is always a great place to come at it. And that's where really the idea for Bubble spawned from. Really.
Am I right in thinking the Betfair founder actually invested as well in the idea?
Yeah, so there's a few of the Betfair guys on our cap table, and that was a really useful network that we tapped into quite a lot in the early days, because there were people there who were just incredibly smart people who had done well at Betfair. And actually, you speak to one of them, and then they're in touch with 3 other guys that you never had personal contact with at Betfair, but who were investing with them. So yeah, there's a nice little Betfair contingent invested in Bubble.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Well, a big part of our incubator program is founders actually prototyping and using the prototype to kind of validate the concept. So, in the early stages, obviously, when we first met, I mean, how did you go about prototyping and really validating the concept before you really got started?
Yeah, I guess we did a little bit of prototyping. I wouldn't even call it prototyping in terms of, look, we took a decision, and there's loads of different ways to do it. And how you do it, I guess, very much depends on your personal circumstances as well, and the product you're building. We felt we had to raise a bit of money to build the first version of the app. So we got a designer and we mocked up wireframes, tried to build like a detailed wireframe. That's why I said probably not quite, it's not hardly a working prototype, but that, when I think back, first ever thing we did that just so we could show investors and help bring it to life. And I found, like, when dealing with angel investors and you kind of coming to them with nothing, I think ultimately if you're coming with them with a working prototype and paying customers, it helps. When you're coming with a PowerPoint slides almost, even small things like that, which help really bring it to life, help massively. So that's when I think back to the first bit of prototype. That's when it came to it. It was then.
That's the type of prototype that we do as well. So high fidelity screen designs, not really any code behind it, but it gives investors the sense of what the product will be, right?
Yeah, and I think at that stage, investors, and the caveat here is I'm not an expert in this, but like, they're investing a lot in their gut and what they love and what they're passionate about and what makes them feel excited. And that's kind of, I found, my experience, the investors you want at that stage. Because anyone at that point who's trying to go too far into like the numbers with you and everything like that, I just think they're going to probably largely waste your time. It's kind of missing the point. So those kind of high fidelity, small things, that just nuggets that kind of get them excited, are actually really powerful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what is the underlying kind of business model that you got, and has it changed since you started?
Yeah, so we're an on-demand marketplace, high volume, low margin. Marketplace product, like a lot of them. So our app effectively is a booking app that connects parents with carers, and we've evolved pricing over time. So when we started, we were never free. We were totally free on the carer side. They set their own prices. They get paid through the app. They kept all the money they earned. We always charge parents a small booking fee. For us, it was £3.50, so quite small per booking. And that's what we launched with. And then probably a year later, we launched what we call platform fees. So that's where we took a rake off what the SIT value is as well. We launched a subscription product following that. So high frequency users, parents could pay us a subscription instead of a transactional booking fee. And that's pretty much, I mean, we tweaked with pricing a little bit, but that's pretty much how we make our money. And yes, as we're now looking at potentially other verticals and other services, we charge slightly differently. But yeah, it's a high volume, low margin business, which is really challenging. I mean, every business and startup has challenges. But when you're trying to build a high volume transactional marketplace, it typically takes lots of money to throw it, like classic Airbnb, Uber and whatnot. That's how we set about doing it.
And do you have a kind of a referral scheme as well?
We have a referral scheme. We had one from the get-go. So we offer parents, we offer all users actually £20 credit split when they refer a user. That's always been built in, but we've done, in one sense, we pretty much all our growth is word of mouth. We really have never done any proper marketing. We just raised some money last year in February 2020 to kind of go to market properly, and then we hit. So in one sense, all of our growth is largely word of mouth, but funnily enough, like the referral mechanic, like it's worked okay. It's never like, you know, we haven't necessarily cracked that that real viral growth, I would say. Yes. But yeah, it's been
interesting. I mean, that was going to be my next question about marketing. How did you, you know, obviously early founders, they don't have the budgets to spend on social media marketing and things like that. So it's interesting to hear that it was mainly word of mouth, but you're fairly constrained, aren't you, to get right up to scale? At some stage, you really need to, you've got all the low hanging fruit and you need to kind of get to the next stage, right?
Yeah, I think so. And to be honest, we're still kind of waiting to get to that stage. So you know, our organic growth, I'd say, was for two reasons. You know, one is I felt, you know, we deal in childcare, right? It's like unbelievably sensitive subject. You know, the typical mantra around startups are like move fast, break things. You know, just like I never felt that totally applied to Bubble, because you can't get it wrong necessarily, right? And I always felt from the get-go we needed a product that was pretty good, because ultimately we have this massive challenge of winning a parent's trust, and they can't just land on an app which just is garbage, basically. Even though your first product should be garbage to an extent, right? You should be embarrassed about your first product. If you're not, they say you've probably spent too long on it. So it was part by design. Like we felt we needed to work quite a long time on product market fit, really delighting those first customers and growing via word of mouth, and also part of, like, funding. You know, we've never raised a massive round of funding, and you know, we'll have another conversation about that and why that was. So we were constrained because you know, B2C marketing is really, really expensive, and if your model is like low margin, you can't spend like hundreds of pounds on a customer, and digital is just getting more and more expensive to acquire. You know, I speak to people who you know, they had great experience in the early days of app marketing through Facebook, where everything was really cheap, and that's just not the case anymore. So until it's kind of a bit of you know, vicious circle or a virtuous circle. Like until you have the funds to like scale, it's very hard to. So you need to be really smart about organic. And so we did lots of things in the early days. You know, and it's like nothing super scientific, I would say. You know, it's like targeting an area, flyering in an area, going to like influencers in an area, be that on social or at local schools or whatnot, and doing a lot of things which at the time probably felt quite painful. And when you say them out loud, it sounds like really, you know, like unscalable at all. But actually, it's just the way to do it, and it worked like reasonably well for us.
Sure. So did you partner with any other businesses, or you kind of spoke to the schools? I know that there's Mumsnet, for example, over in the UK. Did you speak to them? And partner with any?
We spoke to them a little bit. I'm trying to think. Like there was never like one particular partner which we used for distribution. I think it was just a lot of going to like various, like, so with us, with schools, you know, obviously parent groups are like huge in schools. Well, schools should be a huge channel, but like trying to go through a school is just like, you know, is a very uphill battle. So actually what we did is we went through the PTAs, which in parent teacher associations, which are like the power parents in the school, right? The non-official channel, but they actually are the whole network, right? So you actually try and find 20 of those guys, sign them up on deals and get them referring for you. And generally what I found was in the early days, you just really focus, especially when you're starting to put like, you know, 3-year forecasts together, and you know, you've got to focus on like gigantic numbers, and that's really daunting. And actually just focusing on your first like 10, how do I get 10 right? How do I get 100 customers? It's just a much more manageable and like useful way and powerful way of doing it than kind of getting paralyzed a little bit by thinking, shit, I've got to get like 2,000 people. How am I going to do that? Or 5,000 people. So, and in a marketplace as well, you know, those a trust-based marketplace like us, those first 100 customers are basically the work of the next 5,000, because they're the guys who have to use the product first, trust it, and then talk about it, and then everyone else can basically use it based off of their good experience, right? So focusing small, I'd say, is a good way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back 10 years ago so I was part of the team that launched in the UK in 2012 for Airbnb. And there's a lot of parallels here. And actually trust is one of the main things. And at Airbnb, it was such a foreign concept having a stranger, stay in your room. And so we kind of had to build that trust over time. But like, what are the things that you did to kind of build the trust between the parents and the babysitters? Like, are there any key features, or what was
Yeah,
it
so
about?
look, we've always been a super yeah, so well, we were just very focused on the product. Ultimately, yes, marketing and brand definitely can play a massive part in building trust.
Mhm.
But otherwise, it's about actually, does the product deliver on the trust? So for us, in our specific case, it's who are the sitters, who are the
Mm.
nannies, how do we ensure they're high quality in a way that fits our operating model? Because
Yeah.
we're building a marketplace product, light touch, and then how do we, when we're working on their profiles, what are the particular points of the profile that parents really value? When we see that parents were viewing profiles and dropping off, or posting jobs and not confirming them, understanding what is it that stopped them doing that, and then honing in on those particular points. And a lot of the time, the good news is, and this is why I guess user testing is so important, is the changes that can be actually really minimal, like word changes. One thing we did in the early, we have this tool where you basically post your job,
Yeah.
and local nannies apply in real time, and you view their profiles and you confirm the one you want. And we called that, when we launched it, we called it Express Book, because the idea was, you could book someone really quickly. So this button called Express Book. And then we quickly learned that actually it was causing some anxiety amongst parents, because I don't want to, yes, I want a good service and speed, but the idea of booking a nanny in an express fashion makes me feel like, I'm cutting corners or whatnot. So then we changed it to just post a job, right? Same button, same functionality, and that saw better results for us. And then really recently, we've changed it to, instead of, it doesn't say post a job, it says see who's free, because again, people would post a job because everyone wants to see who's free, right?
Yeah.
But saying post a job sounds like a big commitment to some people, right? Like I said, this is a very sensitive area, so customers behave in an interesting fashion. So you learn these very small changes can make really meaningful differences.
And you were A/B testing all of this, I'm guessing. You'd have the two
We've done
different
some A/B testing, yeah. I mean, I've made so many mistakes, and definitely, not testing enough, not speaking to users. Like we spoke a lot to users. I've spoken to a lot of users over the years, like in a structured way, in an unstructured way. So we have done it a lot, but probably haven't done it. My advice would be you could always do it more, and it's never enough. It's sometimes difficult. I know there's a lot said about A/B testing. It's difficult sometimes to A/B test at speed when you're limited resources. So we didn't have really big development team and development budgets that could just spin up 2 versions of everything, and also the resource. I think sometimes yes, there's so much about being deep in the data and being data driven, and of course that's 100% true. But you need to make sure you're resourced up properly to do it. Because I think, again, traps I've fallen into is you want to be data driven. It's the right thing to do. So you set all these dashboards up. You spend forever thinking about how to track the data, and you waste time because you don't have the time, and you don't have the people to actually look at it properly. And that's really frustrating because we've definitely wasted time over the years. I've wasted time. So you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful. I think you've got to be practical and pragmatic, and make sure before you go into A/B testing or tracking. Okay, what do I want to get out of this, and what am I going to do with the information? Almost do I have a very clear plan of what I'm going to use the information for and how I'm going to execute upon it? And if I don't, then don't do it.
And did you spend a lot of time with the first 100, say, parents and babysitters, getting out there and speaking to them directly about the product and finding what they liked and disliked? Did you do a lot of that at the beginning?
Yeah, I did I probably had 100 coffees with just local babysitters and nannies in my local coffee shop. still got, you know, my phone is still like full of like all their contact details. Some of them still like WhatsApp me when they have a problem with the app. You know, they still like WhatsApp me directly, which is fine, obviously. So yeah, I spoke to a lot, and on the parent side as well. So I spoke to both sides. I'm just trying to understand their pain points, and yeah, I think that was like really vital. And again, it's an easy thing to try and rush because you're in a rush to get your product out there. I think the interesting thing I was thinking like before the call was, again, like pitfall to fall into with like user testing and user feedback is it can be a bit dangerous in the sense that like customers don't know what they want, and they can lead you down like the wrong path. And I can't remember who it was I saw say like ask customers for their problems, not their solutions, right?
Yeah.
Solutions can be terrible,
Yeah.
quite frankly. And actually, I was thinking of one pretty fundamental example in our app today, which is still there, where I can probably point back to it coming from like one of these early. I had a group of parents actually in my living room, and I was showing them these early wireframes. So we have a rating system on the app where you know, the sit finishes and the parent rates their sitter. Again, very, very similar to like all marketplace products, right? Our rating system is, so let's say I used a sitter called Jenny, right? It says, would you use Jenny again? Thumbs up, thumbs down, binary rating system. 5 stars. 5 stars was the original plan. And I remember I can think back to this case study group I did, and I showed them the rating system. And I remember one parent put their hand up and was like, I don't like a 5-star system because, you know, what if my sitter just comes on a Saturday night and often, you know, I'm out, they're just sitting on the couch, they watch TV, they're perfectly fine. I get back, like, I'll probably give them 3 stars, right? But then if I saw a sitter with 3 stars, I wouldn't book them. And I remember she kind of got the whole group going. And then by the end of it, like everyone kind of agreed, like a 5-star rating system is probably not the way to go on a product like this. Go binary. And we went binary, and it's still there today. And like by and large, it's worked fine. But we should move. We want to move to a 5-star system because over time we've realised for different reasons it's a better system. And
Interesting.
yeah, I'm not blaming that lady. It's totally my fault. But I can actually think back to that particular discussion coming from one of these group discussions where you need to do user testing in a really structured way and proper way again.
And I guess one person or even 5 people's opinions isn't representative of everybody as well. So
totally. So obviously, like, don't be a fool like me and like dive into like one group's opinion. But you're always going to have that issue. But it's more about understanding their pain points, and then if you have a really good understanding of like what do they need, what don't they have, then it's on you and your product team, you know, I guess, to like design the solutions to that problem, because you have the whole context of everything, as opposed to like ask one person, well, what would you do, or what do you like better, this one or that one? It's just worth being careful about. So finding out and honing in on their pain points is really key.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a 2-sided marketplace. So did you go about getting the sitters on the platform first? So you had the supply, and then you kind of turned on the demand? Is that how you started off?
Yeah, we came up with a number that we felt in a given area we wanted onboarded on the platform before we would start trying to get parents on. So we start with supply, but it's a constant challenge. Like in our space, you know, we actually have a massive oversupply, and our challenge is like parent demand, whereas a lot of other marketplaces I speak to, they have the opposite. And it never stops that problem. And, you know, now, for example, during COVID, where, you know, childcare was allowed, but lots of carers didn't want to go out for the odd job. We had a reversal of the problem. So, that's a problem that never leaves you, basically. And it's just trying to understand what an optimum number is, and then how you keep people engaged. So if you onboard suppliers and they haven't got work, you know, how do you keep them engaged and warm and still, you know, loyal and enjoying your brand in the It's a constant challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my next question. What have been the main challenges to date? And I guess obviously COVID's right up there, as with most businesses. So along with COVID, were there any other kind of touch and go moments, or?
Yeah, I think we've been going properly for a few years, and like I said, we've never raised in the early days. We were doing a few like angel rounds, really to like tie us over. So we definitely came close a couple of times to thinking, we were never like burning, we were never burning huge sums. So we were always, managing things pretty tightly. So it was never a situation, we never got to a situation where it was like, we're going to have to stop doing what we're doing. But we had several situations where it was like, look, it was hard. It was really hard to raise money. We were trying to create something new in a sector which is like just a highly sensitive sector. Raising, even though our numbers and progress were really good, for other reasons, raising was difficult, and there were definitely moments where I was like, how are we gonna get that next round? How are we gonna scale to the next level? And so we've had moments where we've had to cut what we were doing, or tough conversations and whatnot. But I guess that's just part and parcel, and something everyone needs to go through.
Yeah, sure. And I guess typically for each raise, you're aiming to have kind of a 12 to 18 month runway. Is that and for each raise, did that kind of pan out like that, or no? So your burn rate was higher pretty much every time.
Yeah. I think, they say 12 to 18 months. This is if everything's lining up for you perfectly, right? Which is obviously great, and I'm sure there are people on the call who have like businesses that are showing that month-on-month growth, and they can and they can and should plan that way. But I mean, you always got to leave yourself, I think, at least six months, like minimum, the money. But it depends on your situation. It's like if you have a hard cut-off, then I think it's very obviously important to like make sure you have enough runway. We were never in that position. We were always like fairly decent cash-wise, and because, like I said, we never had a gigantic burn. Like, we built quite quickly. We built a very, very lean operational platform that was never like break even, but was pretty close sometimes. Our challenge was, we didn't just want a small platform that was like break even. It's like we really want to push on and scale, and that does require like a lot of investment and loss making for a while, right? So, but it never like works out exactly. Look, if your numbers are, if you're absolutely nailing it, and the numbers and the growth is great, then raising, when you're growing, everything's good. I find, well, not everything's good. You've got problems, but like everyone's happy. There's growth, and then the other problems are solvable problems. The hardest problem is growth, right? If you've got growth, you'll work the other stuff out. Like, stuff's going to go wrong, like the product, the tech, people. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have people who don't think, who don't fancy what you're doing. But if you've got growth, I find like I'm happy. When you're not growing, nothing else matters so much, I find.
I can imagine that. So that first seed round that kind of came in, you're celebrating. How did you allocate that capital like most efficiently? Well, obviously you said that a lot of it was word of mouth, so you didn't spend too much, I'm guessing, on marketing, maybe the odd flyers. Where did most of that seed round go towards? Is it development? Was it salaries? Like, what was the kind of breakdown?
For us, development largely. So it was largely on development, and then in the early rounds, because again, like it obviously really depends on what you're selling and your model, but in a low margin model, to go for high growth, I always felt that you need a good budget to do it, and without a really good, and maybe it's on your personality as well. I'm pretty tight, to be honest, and my nature is like very cash conservative, right? So my always feeling was like, until I have enough money to spend properly, I'd rather keep the money and invest it in other things. Like, you're always thinking about, what do I need to do? And this isn't necessarily the most enjoyable aspect of trying to grow the business, because I think we're all just in it because we love the products we do and we love selling what we sell and building. But the reality is, a lot of the time you've got to think like, what do I need to do to get to my next milestone that's going to allow me to raise more money, which is then going to allow me to scale further, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how I kind of like dealt in like a very short-termist view in that regard. So in the early rounds, it was actually a lot about, I didn't need, it would have been nice, but I didn't need to go get 100,000 new customers. I needed to kind of hit this much smaller milestone, and to do that, right, what product sets do I need to build? What features do I need to get? And then the investment will go in there. With a later round, then we kind of got to this stage where we built, we answered a lot of questions. We've got a great product front and back end. We've got product market fit. Customers love what we love. Now the question about Bubble is, okay, how do you scale? Now you really you're at that stage where a lot of the early questions are answered. You need to like scale now, 5, 10 times and show that you can. So the last round was really like the allocation of that was marketing and growth spend. Because in our case, we'd actually done quite a lot of work on the product. Now, again, people do it in the complete reverse way. A lot of people focus on that growth really early, and then they fix the problems afterwards. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, I'd say.
That's the kind of the Tesla model, right? Like focus pretty much on the product and don't spend on marketing, and hopefully people talk about the product and share it and that type of thing. Bubble and Tesla, same category, right? All right, and I guess like day to day, how are you splitting your time? Obviously, founders spend a lot of their time fundraising. What is your kind of day to day activity at Bubble looking like?
Yeah, now it's a lot of recruitment because we're trying to hire a lot of people. So right now my time is pretty much all spent on that. Like the last weeks, I'm still very hands-on with the product. I guess I have ownership of that, whereas we have other people in the team who are now taking ownership of like more like commercial and growth and marketing and operations. So predominantly like investors, recruitment, and product. We're not of a size yet where I can like kind of sit back and purely just direct. And to be honest, that's not why I love being in the product.
Sure.
Which is something as well, like I know all founders struggle to kind of get themselves out of, which I think is important that it's kind of there's two sides to that, right? I think it's really valuable to still be like very close to the customer and very close to the product. And one, because it just helps ensure that you know what's going on, and also because on a personal level, it's why I started this in the first place and what I really am passionate about and love. So I'd hate to lose that. But on the flip side, it's being good at letting go and letting other people and bringing in other people who are just better than you and can take over. So that's what I'm trying to do at the moment more.
So when you were rolling out the first app, did you cut in a CTO or did you use an agency? How did you go about that?
So we used an agency. So we've always been an agency built. So one of the things we're trying to hire for at the moment is an in-house. Apologies if you can hear the next door neighbour's gardeners going off, but about that. We always use an agency, and so we use one agency to build it. We moved on to a new agency that's been building it for the last 3 and a bit years, and they're a small agency in London, and it's gone. In some respects, it's been fantastic with them because look, I think the value of having in-house engineering part of the founding team and part of the business, I think, is unquestionable and definitely preferable. But ultimately, look, we weren't engineers and we knew what we wanted to build, and it was just quicker. And they've done a great job building it. I think we're at the point now, for various reasons, where we want to hire in-house. But that's difficult. The longer you go without in-house, and the bigger your stack gets, the harder the more challenging it is to bring great people in, which we're going through at the moment. Like I'm very confident we're gonna do what we need to do. But one thing I'm learning right now is, the longer you go without an in-house team, the harder I think it's to hire them. So my advice would be to try and do it early.
And typically CTOs. And typically CDOs and engineering teams are very picky with, legacy code.
Exactly.
They're very funny about that.
I don't blame them. It's like, if you're building a house or renovating a house and a second builder comes in halfway through, they're always, pretty smug and wary. of what's come before, and that's totally fair enough. That's just the nature of it. So obviously, as with all recruitment, right, it's on me, it's on us to like convince people of the vision and the mission and the quality of the code, and to make sure we're doing it in the right way. But you can't get away from that, and that is definitely going to limit your options in terms of people you can bring in. But having said that, you know, hiring great engineers is really hot. Is not easy. It's not easy. Full stop. And in the early days, you know, you could end up spending so much time and like money and resource on trying to build that in-house team, where actually what you need to do is focus on growth, right? And actually working with a good agency and just parking that bit can allow you to focus on that growth, which is actually going to move your business further along than spending those early times building out that in-house team. If you're lucky enough to co-found a business or found a business as an engineer, amazing. But if you're not, finding people at any stage is tough. And there are lots of great businesses that have been built with non-in-house teams as well. So try not to get an eye trial.
Yeah, absolutely. I've lost you a bit there. Can you still hear me? Ari. Is everybody there, or am I frozen? I'm still here. Okay, I think I think his battery died, possibly. So we'll give it a couple of minutes. But actually, this is probably a good time if anybody wants to type in some questions for Ari. Just write them in the chat, and then here we go. Oh, you're back.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Did your battery died, or?
My Wi-Fi might have gone. Sure, I just lost connection. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, just I think I've got a couple more questions. Oh, lost. Yeah, strange. It's kind of cutting out. Yeah, a couple more questions I think before we ask the guest to ask some. So, yeah, I guess what about competitors? Are there many in the space at the moment? And if so, like, what are you guys doing that is different to what others are doing? Are there US competitors or?
Yeah, there are kind of a few in the UK. There's like childcare is quite a fragmented market, so you have, you know, there's no one doing specifically what Bubble does.
Okay.
But there are other ways for parents to find childcare, legacy providers, but also some new providers in the UK who are doing slightly different forms of childcare, but they're competitive to an extent. In the US, there are a couple of big players. One of them is called Urban Sitter, who raise a lot of money, but quite similar to what we do. So it's a great, like, I think childcare is a segment or a sector which a lot of people look at and say it's an absolutely gigantic market. You know, 30% of, I think in UK, 30% of the parent's income is spent on childcare, and it's just very underserved. So in one respect, it kind of is a really big opportunity, but it's very fragmented, and there's space as well for more people. I still remember, like, again, the other thing, in the early days, I was quite obsessed with competitors. Typically, I'd always find out about one at about midnight. You know, scrolling on my phone just before I'm supposed to go to bed. But again, one thing I've learned as well is just to not be obsessed with them. And they can, again, take up too much of your time, too much of your energy. I think if they're new people like yourselves, they're probably making the same mistakes as you and scrambling around under the surface as well. So, but yeah, they're out there.
Yeah, that's
if they're not, then you're probably doing something wrong. You know, in a way, you validate your idea. It validates your idea with investors. Like, it's funny with investors. Like, you think going into a pitch thinking like, I'm the only one doing this, you know, the opportunity's all mine is a great thing to have. But I find the opposite, actually. You know, they want to see other people doing it successfully. That helps
Mm.
helps your case.
Interesting. That's really fascinating. So yeah, a lot of our founders obviously going through the incubator, they're going to be raising their seed round. Do you have any advice for kind of approaching the investors, or objections that you normally get? What tips would you give when landing that first seed round? Preparing the pitch, or did you make any mistakes when you first started raising investment?
Yes, I think you make mistakes. You probably waste time speaking to people that you shouldn't.
Okay.
And it's hard to be picky because you're trying to raise money. It's not easy to raise money. Someone shows an interest, and it's very hard to be like, well, I'm gonna kind of say no or not talk to that person. But you definitely waste time. So being quite trying to be smart about the types of people you approach. So like if it's angel investors, looking at the other things they invest in, seeing if they've got like similar portfolio to what you do or interests in what you're doing is really important. And then when you get into dialogue with the early stage like investors, like being pretty disciplined at that point around who you then engage with is really important, because I touched on it earlier. Try and look, angel investors have absolute every single right to kind of ask loads of questions and do their due diligence, right? But a lot of them do waste your time, and being good at spotting like who's wasting my time and I'm just going to kind of swerve will save you a lot of time and headache. And it's really important as well that you get people in early who are yes, they come with the check, but who are actually going to be supportive and help you. And getting good at identifying people who are just going to be problematic early is a really valuable skill. So that's what I that's a big tip of mine. The other thing as well, just obviously like with your pitch, like I found people want to, like you touched on it earlier, they want to know what the money is going to be spent on, like, and being able to define that clearly. They don't, at that stage, right, you're winging it, like to a large degree. You don't know the answers to these things. They don't expect you to know the answers. They just want you to have a point of view, and that is defensible. Whether that's like an assumption that you make in your model about what a customer is going to spend or how many times they're going to use your product, or it ultimately doesn't really matter that number at the end of it. It's got to be exciting to them, and it's got to be something that you can defend in the meeting when they send you're mental. No, you're not going to get 1,000. Why would 1,000 people kind of use you in 6 months, for example? Just having an answer, and that's what I find. Not getting. I personally like. I don't know, British thing, quite like self-deprecating and trying to look for like why this won't work, or why this number looks massively inflated. But when you think to investors, like they want to be excited. They know that they're taking a punt on you, right? So they know that, and they just want a reason to believe. So they don't need the answers; they need reasons to believe. So I'd like to be really focused on that. And the last thing is like just grow. Like, how are you going to grow? How are you going to acquire customers? And again, in my experience, the thing I enjoyed the most about the early stage of like thinking through Bubble and getting it off the ground, I loved thinking about the product and how customers are going to use it and the different features that we can build and the theory around it, right? But the most important thing at launch time is like, how do you go and acquire customers? So I probably left that, I didn't prioritize that enough, but that's the most important thing. That's the thing that hits you, when you eventually launch is right, I've got to go get some customers now. And so being really clear on how you're going to do that, even if it's 1 or 2 channels, I find they want to know, and it's really valuable. A good answer on that.
Yeah, well, no, that's fantastic advice. Did you consider crowdfunding fairly early on? Was that an option for you? I feel like it could do quite well on Crowdcube, but you've probably looked into it, right?
I've spoken to Crowdcube a couple of times. I know a couple of the guys there, and they're really great. So we have considered it a couple of times. The timing never worked for us in the end, because and I do think it could work really well for us, and potentially something we might look at in our next round. To come in alongside any other investors we get in, because it can do wonders for the brand. I think doing something, in my experience, doing something like that when you're in a real position of strength. So i.e. in your raise, you're in a real position of strength. So you've got great interest, you've got great momentum. And you're also at a stage in your business where you would actually capitalize on the brand, on the B2C brand exposure that CrowdKey would give you. That's the best time to go in and do it. And I know a lot of people have done it and had amazing results with it. So potentially something we'd look in the future. And we have considered it. It's just the timing never quite worked for us until now.
Yeah, right. And I guess, final question. I won't keep you too long. So what are your kind of next steps for Bubble? Like, where is this going?
Yes, we're trying to, like everyone else, we're trying to get through the pandemic, and it's almost like, I wouldn't say we've done a lot of good in the last year. So I wouldn't say it's like put everything on pause, COVID, but literally had just raised, nearly $3 million, and it was like, right, we're going to grow, and then the pandemic hit, which doing what we do, put everything from a growth perspective largely on pause. So for us, it's almost going back to like, right, what was the pitch a year ago when we raised that money? What was the plan? How are we going to go and grow, and kicking that off again? So we're really excited about doing that in the second half of the year. And we have new service verticals that we want to launch as well. So in the works too. So that's our getting back to growth. ASAP is the main objective of the business right now. Yeah,
exciting stuff. So that seems like it'll happen in the next couple of months, hopefully, when that's getting vaccinated. Yeah, exciting stuff. Well, if anybody has some questions for Ari, pop them in the chat there. I'll give you 60 seconds. I may have probably covered quite a bit, but anybody have any questions? There you go. Is Bubble your full-time focus?
Yes, absolutely. And it was, so I probably spent 6 months kind of sketching stuff out and just fleshing, when I was in my previous job, and fleshing out the business plan for it and like how I would do it, and then eventually like took the plunge. And again, I don't think there's a right or wrong here. In my experience, like again, especially if you want to go and raise money, I think if you're not raising money, you can do what you want, really. Do it how you want to do it. Do it part-time for as long as you feel you need to. As soon as I feel you want to talk to investors, if you want to get their cash to raise, they want to see typically like full-time focus. So it was really important for us to kind of jump in full-time. And investors aside, like it just required full-time focus because, starting a business and growing it is such hard work. And it's self-fulfilling in a way. If you don't throw yourself fully into it, you never know what would have happened if you would have done, right? And you had that physical and mental focus to do it. So yes, absolutely, it is. Aside from my 3 kids, obviously, I kind of run Bubble on the side of managing them. But it is my full time.
Brilliant. And what do you know now that you kind of wish you knew when you started? So is there anything you would have changed about the trajectory? Yes.
That's a really hard question, because I promise you there are so many things that I wish I would have known now. I think the main thing I would say to people is, which is kind of obvious, right? And again, probably just points to my own naivety, and I'm not reflecting that on anyone else. It's just like the unbelievable difficulty of doing this, right? And how like 99% of it is just hard work, and a lot of the time like problems and graft and dealing with stuff. And you get exposed, whether it's Techcrunch or LinkedIn or whatnot, to like all the gloss, the Y plan style, raising 30 million Snoop Dogg involved type thing, right? And that can like cloud what your expectations about going into it. And you have these expectations based on the minutiae of like successful stories that you read about in the paper this morning, and whether you even on a conscious level, you're very good at kind of compartmentalizing that. On a subconscious level, it definitely plays a massive part in like the expectations you set for yourself, and then how you rate and value your work against those expectations. And they're very, very hard to meet, right? So just like understanding that it's a long process, it's not an overnight success. I think helps massively now and gives perspective. Also like going back to the investor conversation, those early investors, that early equity you give away, those early deals you do, so important. Mm-hmm. And it's again, it's two sides to it, because you get so much advice saying, look, don't quibble over stuff at this stage. You want to get the money and you want to grow, and that is true to an extent. But you do bad deals at this stage, and it also can have a really big impact on what you do. So being being mindful of that. Although, like I said, we've had great luck with our investors in the main part. But yeah, sorry if that's a bit garbled, because they're just literally 100 things. Realizing you're going to make mistakes and just getting good at dealing with it. Yeah, the biggest thing.
And how many investors have you approached, and kind of over what time period? You're going for your Series B next? Is that right?
We'll call it Series A. We didn't call our last round a Series A. We called it a C+ round.
Okay, so that was a seed. Yeah, fairly decent seed round then.
Yeah, like I think over the years we've been doing this, well over 100 investors. If you're talking about angel investors, many. We have a really big cap table now, because we raise like 4 small seed rounds over time, and so we have quite a lot of small tickets. Yeah. I'd say like, we have an investor sheet of people we've approached. We're probably approaching like 200 names, and that's blended like angel investors and institutions as well.
And did you do a pre-seed friends and family round, small round at the beginning?
I didn't. I didn't. We very, very few, maybe 1 or 2 friends in the cap table, and that was them. That was them asking me, insisting to invest, I'd say. I never actually went to them, which again is probably counter how a lot of people do it, right? Again, it kind of depends on your personality to an extent, and how you want to build that. But we were lucky because we worked at Betfair. We had quite a good network of people who were angel investors, right? So there was an obvious people for us to go to. So that's why in our case, we don't have lots of friends and family on the cap table.
Yeah, interesting. And next question, do you have plans to enter other markets? I'm guessing you're London centric for the time being. Are you going? You got the blueprint going. You're probably going to expand.
Yeah, I would like to. Our strategy is UK first, and like let's build a massive business in the UK. Again, it's specific to what we do. We are we're this app tech product, but it's not a plug and play, because what we do is like, again, I keep saying this word, like super sensitive. There are cultural differences, there are regulatory differences. I know from experience it takes a lot of time to like build that initial hyper local growth, right? Now, if you go and raise £20 million or 10 million or whatever, if you have a huge budget, then yes, you could probably go and attack these places quicker. But for us as well, we figure if we can build this really trusted brand and work so hard at doing that in the UK, and there are other ways to then service, other services, other ways to monetize the marketplace, we're better off trying to build that in the UK than trying to really quickly expand really rapidly. So yeah, I would like to do it. And I think there's an opportunity for us to do it, but I think it's probably the harder path than trying to maximize what we've already got in the market that we're in.
Yeah, brilliant. And sorry if you mentioned this, but did you start off as a sole founder and then brought on co-founders?
No, I co-founded the business with someone I worked with. They stepped away about 2 years ago, and we're very amicable. But again, these things happen. They're really common. Startups are incredibly hard and grueling, really. So you have people come in and out at different paths.
And did you have separate roles and responsibilities to begin with, or did you overlap in a lot of the?
Yeah, we tried. I think it's easier if you have like an engineer and a commercial person. Then it's like a very natural split. So neither of us were engineers, so there was definitely more like overlap in what we were doing. But yeah, you try and like divvy up the work based on like skill set and try and be really honest about who's good at what. Which isn't always an easy conversation to have, actually.
Sure.
Having it early as well, I'd say, is really, really important, so that if there are founders on the call who are multi-founder teams and there isn't a really like natural, obvious split in roles, like being I guess it's being really upfront and honest and trying to delineate that particular issue quickly is really valuable.
Sure, cool. And yeah, I guess last question is, how did you know how much you need to raise for from investors? Y Plan one stage raised 30 million. You raised 2 million in your seed round. Like, how did you get that figure? And how did you forecast how long it was going to last, or did you just go for the maximum you thought you could raise?
Again, I think this so much comes down to the personality of the founders, right? It's like, what do you want? I am quite a cautious, conservative guy, if I'm honest, right? And so the thought of going and getting 10 million quid, like, it's really exciting to some extent.
They want that money back.
Like, there's definitely a part of me that's like, that just brings more problems, right? So I think it's just really important to understand, like, what do you need to get the business to where you want to get it to by a certain point, and trying to put that down on paper and then coming up with a number, right? Sure. Ultimately, people always say, look, if you can raise more, raise more. And I think that's true. Like, it doesn't mean if you're trying to raise 5 and you get offered 10, doesn't mean take 10, or does it mean if you're trying to raise 5 and you get offered 7, potentially like take 7. So I think it's always good to take more, because the biggest stress I've had over the whole period is when you are running out of money. It's just incredibly stressful. So, kicking that problem down the road by taking on some more is definitely advisable. Obviously, like, that's very easier said than done, but then it's all tied to valuation, right? It's all well and good someone saying, well, take 10 million instead of 5. Well, unless I'm going to double my valuation, then I'm not going to do that. And obviously that's very black and white, and there's bits in between. So it's about, like, what do you need to get the business to where you want to get it to? Like, what do you need, like, equity to retain equity wise? Like, what are you comfortable giving away, I guess? And those two numbers, like, together will tell you, how much am I prepared to take on now, if you're in that lovely position of having too much money thrown at you.
And did you feel at the beginning you gave away too much equity, more than you wanted to, or?
I think everyone, to a large extent, feels like that. I think ultimately you never know the answer to that question until, an exit comes, or you reach a certain scale, and then you look back and you're like, well, actually, I could do a deal, didn't I? So I'm still too early to kind of answer that question. But what I will say is it's definitely a balance, right? It's definitely like you don't want to over obsess about it, because really, like, what you're trying to build here is something massive. But also, like, yes, you're trying to build something massive, but speaking honestly and practically, you are trying to build something massive, and that's obviously, like, the goal, and that's what's getting investors excited, and that's what you hear everyone saying in all of their interviews and whatnot. But I think maybe, like, there is an option B sometimes where it doesn't go stratospheric, or it doesn't go stratospheric as, like, quickly as you'd want it to, and then you've got to make sure you haven't put yourself in a situation where, well, either it goes stratospheric and I'm happy, or it doesn't go stratospheric and I'm buggered, basically, because that's kind of crap, I think. And I think a lot of startup, it feels like it is that way, where it's either like, stratospheric, or it's all for nothing. And I don't think it needs to be that way. I think it can be definitely, like, an in-between the way. And that's where, like, how much you retain is important. Of course it's important. And I think anyone tells you otherwise, like, is not really talking much sense and isn't really appreciating the situation. But on the other side of it, like, look, it's about, like, moving quickly and getting funds in to grow a really big pie that you have a small piece of, rather than, like, a really small pie that you have all of, really. It's a balancing act.
Yeah. Great. Good note to end on. So Ari, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time to have a chat, and hopefully post-COVID pop over and have a pint in a controlled setting.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone. Good luck to everyone. Cool. And yeah, I hope it was useful.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. All right. Cheers, Ari. Catch you later.